Alright, when this video comes out, Genshin 2.2 should be almost out, or actually out, it just depends on your region. And with it, everyone who wasn't on PSN can get Aloy for free in the mail. Now, for the past 6 weeks I've been playing Aloy almost constantly, so let's have a look at how she works and what you can do with her. Keep in mind that Aloy is a character who came to Genshin as part of a collaboration with Horizon Zero Dawn. This is why PSN players got her first before everyone else.
For new players out there, I just need to note that in order to level up Aloy, you're going to need to unlock some things in the mid to late game of the current patch. So what I mean is, you're going to need to unlock Dragon Spine to fight the Cryo Hypostasis, and you're also going to need to unlock Inazuma's Watatsumi Island and Serai Island in order to farm for the Spectral Hearts that you need in order to level up Aloy and her talents. Keep in mind you can also buy those Spectral Hearts from Paimon's Star Glitter shop though. Now, when it comes to Aloy's kit, she does have a rather straightforward kit, but there is quite a bit of complexity involved with her special. So let's have a look at how her kit works, let's have a look at how her talents work, some special tactics, what kind of teams make sense with her, and of course, how I've been building her. Let's start with her kit. Aloy's normal attacks are pretty straightforward in terms of a 5-hit combo, in the sense that her first basic attack is in fact a 2-hit combo, so you only need to click 4 times in order for a 5-hit combo to work. Now, this particular normal attack combo is going to be affected by her special, but we will discuss this a little bit later. Her aimed charge attack is also a very straightforward aimed charge shot without any special mechanics unlike Ganyu's or Yoimiya's or Tartalia's. But keep in mind that when you use an aim charge attack, like all archery charge attacks, precision hits, i.e. headshots, are guaranteed to crit. So that's of course going to be very, very useful. So at level 8, these are the attributes that she has. This will of course inform the amount of damage that I do with Aloy as of recording this video. Aloy's ultimate ability is also a very straightforward nuke ability. It basically does a bunch of damage in an area of effect in one go. It has a lower energy cost of 40, so it doesn't take a whole lot to get her ultimate back really quickly. And these are the attributes at level 9, which of course will affect the damage that I do with her as of recording this video. Aloy's special ability is where the complexity of her kit lies within. To start off with, Aloy throws a cryo grenade at the enemy. Now, it doesn't matter whether or not this grenade hits the enemy or hits the ground, because it will then explode, and it will explode into a bunch of smaller cryo bomblets. But you do of course want to make it hit the enemy so that you do a bunch of damage. Now, any Destiny player among us may recognize this effect from a variety of rocket launches. When an enemy is hit by her grenades or her bomblets, the damage gets decreased. So this is of course a great way to keep yourself a little bit more alive by debuffing the enemy attack. The big thing about these bomblets is that they remain on the ground, and this is very important to keep in mind as we now look at Aloy's special ability buffing her overall damage. When it comes to enemies getting hit by Aloy's grenade and her bomblets, when that happens, Aloy gets a stacking bonus. This stacking bonus is called the coil bonus, but I'm going to refer to it as the stacking bonus. This stacking bonus buffs her normal attack damage. So the more stacks you have, the more damage your basic attacks suddenly start to do. Should 4 enemies be hit by her grenades or her bomblets, thus Aloy getting 4 stacks of this stacking bonus, Aloy's stacking bonus reaches its peak, and at this peak, she goes into what is called the rushing ice state, where her normal attacks get a further damage bonus, and they become infused with cryo damage. This of course turns Aloy into a cryo mage. All of this is to say that the goal when using Aloy's special ability is to get Aloy's grenades and bomblets to hit enemies as quickly as possible in order to build up her stacking bonus, which in turn increases her normal attack damage, before infusing her normal attacks with cryo damage. But keep in mind there is a cooldown between the stacks. You have to wait about 0.1 second between each stack for each stack to actually register as a new stack of this stacking bonus. At level 8, here are the attributes of the damage for the grenade and the bomblets, as well as the damage debuff that it gives to enemies, as well as how much damage your normal attacks do when affected by various states of Aloy's stacking bonus. Speaking of talents, let's have a look at these talents that Aloy comes with. The talents that Aloy comes with when they are unlocked by Ascension are adding to the complexity of her special ability. Her first talent is called Combat Override. Essentially what happens is that Aloy's stacking bonus will also further increase her attack by 16%. Now keep in mind this is just a buff to her attack percent stat, not her overall damage, unfortunately. So in a similar fashion, it also increases her party members' attack by 8%.
Aloy does not need to be on the field for this bonus to get applied, so you could potentially chuck the grenades, swap to someone else, and even when the combat override buff is gone, if someone happens to walk over a bomblet, you get a new combat override buff even if Aloy is not on the field. Her second talent is called Strong Strike. This is when Aloy is in the Rushing Ice stage, she starts to build up a cryo damage bonus. Now Rushing Ice itself only lasts for 10 seconds, and you get a 3.5% cryo damage bonus per second. So what that means is at the final 10th second, you will have 35% extra cryo damage. But it only lasts for a second before it's all gone. Aloy also has a very useful passive, in that birds and pigs won't suddenly fly or run away from you when you approach them. This means that Timmy's pigeons will get absolutely decimated by anyone with an AoE ability when you have Aloy in your party. For example, now as a Ukrainian StarCraft professional player has always said, let's have a look at some
Special tactics.
Special tactics.
Special tactics. Special tactics.
special tactics. Now that we're aware of Aloy's entire kit, there are a few special tactics that you can use when you're fighting as Aloy. Jean is probably the best Animo vacuum to bring to an Aloy team, as she can hold her special ability to suck in the bomblets in a sustained manner. Keep in mind that there is that 0.1 second cooldown between stacks if you want to get Aloy's stacks to build up. As a direct result of this specific cooldown, I feel like Sucro's vacuums, and potentially even Kazuha's vacuums, although I don't have him, are probably going to be too quick in bringing those bomblets together. In a similar vein, if you accidentally suck up all of Aloy's bomblets with Jean's hold special, and then you fling them at the enemy, they're all going to hit pretty much simultaneously, and that's unfortunately going to result in one, at most 2 stacks, as opposed to potentially 4 stacks. Venti, on the other hand, can't even vacuum up the bomblets in the same way that he can't even vacuum up Klee's bomblets, so he's completely useless in this regard, but feel free to bring him for various other reasons. When you have the Strong Strike talent unlocked, you can consider counting up to 10 when you use your special in order to time your ultimate. So what that means is, you want to count to 8 seconds. So for example, we chuck the grenade, and then we start counting 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi, 8 Mississippi, and then drop your ult. Because your ultimate takes about a second and a half because of the animations, you can then time your ultimate to do its damage when you are in the final second of your Strong Strike cryo damage bonus, and in doing so you do a lot of extra damage. It actually does make a bit of a difference compared to just using your ultimate just willy-nilly whenever you want. You don't necessarily have to be attacking with Aloy in those 8 seconds. You could potentially be using those 8 seconds to set up a bunch of other buffs as well. Gyarados and Jean, Moda, Benny, reverse melt through Benny, drop the ult and you do 100,000 damage. Speaking of teams, let's have a look at some teams that work with Aloy. So the kinds of teams that you want to use with Aloy will of course depend on whether you want to use her as a main DPS or as a sub DPS or some sort of a battery player. I personally prefer to use Aloy as a main DPS, but that's only because I've played through Horizon Zero Dawn, and thus I have a huge affinity for her as a character. I tend to like to use the characters that I actually like as the main DPS, so that's why I also do main DPS Lisa, despite the fact that a lot of people would use her as a sub DPS. Anyway, if you want to use Aloy as a main DPS, then I think there's probably a handful of characters that can be very, very helpful for her. If you want to do a freeze comp, a perma-freeze comp, then you might want to bring along an off-field Hydro like Mona, Shincho, hell, even Kokomi Barbara, someone who can make enemies wet when they're off-field. I personally would then also like to bring along Rosaria for crit rate purposes, but you could also bring along Diona for shield purposes. Keep in mind that when you have double cryo on your team, this of course increases your crit rate against anyone who's affected by cryo, or hell, even frozen, by 15%. That is part of the cryo resonance. And then on top of that, there is of course the Blizzard Strayer set, which we'll talk about a little bit later. You can also do melt comps. Just bring along an off-field pyro like Xiangling. Is she the only off-field pyro? Xinyan might work as well. Or Benny. Or if you're really desperate, you can try and use Yanfei and Klee. And at that point, you have 2 goals that you can play towards, depending on how you want to do this. You could activate the Rushing Ice state on Aloy and then use her as a cryo procer, and then have Xiangling's Pyronado and Gooba do a bunch of melt damage, and that of course could be really high damage for Xiangling. Or alternatively, you do the opposite. You set someone's ass on fire through Xiangling's Pyronado or Gooba, and then you do reverse melts on a near constant basis, either through Ice Rush or through her ultimate, or hell, even her special. You can do a lot of damage through that. Alternatively, you could use Aloy as part of the national team, and I'm really referring to Gacha Gamer for this one, where apparently you would replace Chongyun in the national team, and then you would have Aloy, Benny, Xiangling, and Xinqiu. I personally don't do national team memes, but it is what it is. Keep in mind though that the Lithic Spear would lose out on some value because Aloy is most certainly not from Liyue. Such is the power of the national team. If you happen to be playing co-op with your friends, and one of them has Yoimiya or a Pyromage, Klee, Yanfei, then you could try to coordinate with them. Getting your Ice Rush state to activate, and then having Yoimiya drop her special in order to infuse her basic attacks with Pyro will basically mean you have two archers who are able to attack really quickly and do a lot of mass melting. That is of course going to be really strong. Alternatively, if you are using a Pyromage as a friend, then you just play as normal. At that point, you're just doing mass melts, and someone is going to be doing a lot of extra damage as a direct result of these mass melts. Could be you, or it could be them. You'll probably end up doing more damage on value if your Pyromage or Yoimiya is the one who's infected with those melts. Alternatively, if you want to use Aloy as a sub DPS / battery character, there are a bunch of teams where she can be very helpful. Anyone that involves a cryo main DPS like Eula, Ayaka, at that point Aloy can be a very useful sub DPS battery. And the idea is that because you are using a character who has not just a really high amount of cryo elemental particles that come from her ultimate, but also an ultimate that is really cheap, you could potentially run her with something like a 4-piece Noblest set and then just constantly do her ultimate and buff your entire team. Quick swap to her to do a bit of burst damage, drop her ultimate, go back to Ayaka, or go back to Eula, etc. Speaking of artifacts, let's have a look at some builds. Now, in terms of the weapons, out of the weapons that I currently have, I feel like Skyward Harp and Viridescent Hunt are both very useful for all-round Aloy builds. Sackbow could also be very useful if you want to use Aloy as a battery for Eula and Ayaka. Crescent could be a perfectly fine free-to-play option. I haven't actually used Predator yet because it doesn't actually work on PC per se, but from what I've heard, it's not particularly good. And Rust is definitely good for anyone who's not interested in using Aloy's charge attacks, but as someone who prefers archers to actually do archer things, it's not the weapon for me. Out of the weapons that I don't have, from what I've gathered from reading the effects of the Amos bow, it sounds like it would be absolutely fantastically amazing on Aloy. Elegy for the End doesn't sound particularly useful on Aloy, but I don't have it, so I don't really know. And Thundering Pulse seems really strong on Aloy, especially with a permafreeze comp where you could potentially just go whole ham on that crit damage and just run 4-piece Blizzard Strayer. And at that point you don't have to worry too much about crit rate, I guess, but we'll just have to see. Otherwise, I would also recommend Stringless if you only want to use Aloy's skills and you have no intention of using her basic attacks. Favonius Warbow could be also a fantastic option for Aloy to be a battery. Personally, I will be sticking with Skyward Harp. Now, in terms of Aloy's artifacts, there's nothing particularly unusual about Aloy in terms of what she scales off, so basically you just want to be aiming for as much attack, crit rate, crit damage as possible with your artifacts. Keep in mind you'll probably still want to be using a cryo damage cup despite the fact that Aloy gets a normal amount of cryo damage bonus as part of her ascension, and of course there is also the additional cryo damage bonus that comes from Strong Strike. Although I do wonder if going for an attack cup would be better. I don't know. It does sound like it could be better, but I think generally speaking you still want to go for that cryo damage cup anyway. In terms of the sets to use, at least 2-piece Blizzard Strayer is usually a good choice. Going for a 4-piece Blizzard Strayer is absolutely perfectly fine for a permafreeze comp. Keep in mind that effect will then bring in a lot of crit rate, so you don't necessarily need to worry about crit rate. That's why I can actually run a 37% crit rate Aloy, and with 4-piece Blizzard Strayer and someone like Rosaria and hell, even a permafreeze comp, I still do pretty well. 2-piece Blizzard Strayer, 2-piece Noblesse is obviously going to be a very good all-rounder set. And a 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate can be a very fun way to play Aloy, but you'll really be trying to hit those ultimates quite a lot.
And for new players, I'd probably just recommend 4-piece martial artist or 4-piece berserker or 2-piece berserker, 2-piece martial artist. I don't know, I don't really have any experience using these lower tier artifact sets, so let me know in the comments which one you'd recommend.
So that's pretty much it when it comes to Aloy. In summary, she has a somewhat straightforward kit with all the complexity being held with her grenades and her bomblets. Thus bringing her in permafreeze comps and melt comps is generally the way to go, but I still bring her with the most random team comps of characters I just simply like. She's also got a variety of weapons which could be very powerful in her hands, and her artifact building is pretty straightforward, very similar to a lot of other DPS characters. The biggest flaw that I have with Aloy is the fact that she has no constellations. And so far as I can tell, there are no plans for Aloy to have constellations, and that makes me very sad. But otherwise, I've been really enjoying Aloy in all aspects of the game, and this includes Spiral Depression. So I hope you guys enjoy this. Let me know what you think about Aloy in the comments below. Now that you finally have Aloy, how do you feel about Aloy? Is she perhaps a character that you like to use, or maybe she's just someone that you'll have in the background or not even use at all? She's not for everyone, obviously, and if you're a whale and you have all sorts of 5 stars available, you probably won't be using Aloy because she's not as strong as them. But in general, I still find that she's absolutely perfectly fine for pretty much everything in the game, so I enjoy using her nonetheless. But that's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you liked this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Got something for you.
Sweet dreams.
This'll pack a punch. The hunch is on.